Hello, everybody, and welcome to Speak Out, the OutWrite podcast. I'm your host, JQ. You can use any pronouns for me, and we have a lot of guests today.
I'm Raven, they, she. I brought the guests.
I'm Jules, they, she.
I'm Emma, is, they, she, he pronouns.
I am Dr. Kara Plachek, and I use either she or they pronouns.
My name is Flick, and I use he or she pronouns.
And today we're going to discuss all things in the world of kink. More of an introductory episode, so for those of you who are super knowledgeable, maybe not a lot here for you, but this is definitely a world that I know you, Kara, have said, is something that a lot of people find interesting, but also intimidating.
Not necessarily intimidating, more so that, when I have classes on sexualities at the UC schools across SoCal, I usually get that this was really the module that people were most interested in, but didn't really know a lot about and weren't sure about where to get information. But the desire for people to kind of be more informed about this is very much alive and well. So hopefully we can continue with that through this podcast. Thanks for inviting me.
And actually, speaking of, we should probably do a little bit of introducing ourselves. I'm here every week. I'm just here to facilitate, really. But Raven, do you want to talk about yourself a little bit?
Okay, yeah. Hi, I'm Raven. I'm a lifestyle dom. This is my sub. Yeah. I'm a member of a local dungeon club in the greater LA area. I've been in the kink world for about 2.5 years, but didn't get really into the community aspects of it until about a year and a half ago. And now I'm really interested in writing about it and informing the general queer community about kink and why kink should be included in Pride celebrations.
Yeah, so I'm Jules, as I mentioned. I've been in the lifestyle for about 5 years. I've been part of the community for about 4. I go to the same club that Raven mentioned earlier. I was switchy at the beginning, but very submissive. I very much view it as part of, an integral part of my identity, and yeah, we'll talk about that a bit later.
Yeah, Flick, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Oh, yeah, of course. So, my name is Flick. That's actually my scene name. It's the name that I go by when I frequent dungeons or engage with the kink community. In terms of being a part of the community, well, I've been kinky for a very long time. Not quite sure how long, since high school at least. I'm about 27 now. But I've only been a member of a local dungeon in the LA area for about a year now. I can attribute to how difficult it is to kind of get into kink when you don't know anybody who's already a part of the community. But rest assured that if you want to find yourself there, you will.
All right, so this is Kara, and I work for the sociology departments here at UCLA as well as at UC Irvine. My general wheelhouses would be in courses related to gender, sexualities, pop culture, and also just all sorts of different kinds of deviance. So very excited to be here.
Oh, I'm Emma. I'm here every week. I'm also just here to spectate because I thought this would be a really fun episode.
Yes. So I guess first question that I have quote unquote prepared is what's your favorite thing about being part of the kink community?
I think I'd have to say the community in and of itself is very inviting, at the very least from a queer perspective. The dungeon that I frequent is very queer friendly. There are a lot of queer people there, and it's made me feel very, well, for one word, wanted. And I've really enjoyed being there and just talking with people, engaging with, like-minded individuals is such a normalized thing, but it's really people who like the same things that you like and aren't afraid to engage with it, when I first entered the dungeon, I didn't really know a lot about what to expect, but people were very warm and very, very inviting. And the way that the place that I go to works is they have these name tags. So if you don't know anybody, then you can look for somebody with a green name tag, and if you like what they're doing, then maybe you'll go over and talk to them and learn a little bit from them. There's been a lot of exchange of knowledge in that sort of regard. Without getting too intimate into it just yet, I've learned a lot about myself and what I enjoy, and a lot about what maybe I don't quite enjoy.
I think similarly, the community aspect is really important to me. I think that we often look at BDSM and kink through a very sexualized lens.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But it's really so much more than that. For me, going into the dungeon space that we were talking about is very much a place where I can be like my full authentic self. I don't have to mask. I don't have to put on this face to save face.
Yeah,
And
like a persona.
yeah, like a persona, and it's just and that's really beautiful to me to just be able to be myself.
Yeah, bouncing off of that, I think the Venn diagram between kinky, queer, and neurodivergent, there's a large circle in the middle. And I think it's just very nice to be able to find a community to do kinky things with, but also just to be friends with. Like, we do a lot of like game nights and stuff with just people in the community because we all just like relate to each other a lot. And it's really nice to have that community. On the less serious side, I'm also a sadist, and it's a very safe, nice environment to get that out. And
speaking as a masochist myself, it's also really nice to find people who are into that sort of thing and have fun with it. Now, for me, kink has, before I got into the community, it had a lot of sexual implications, but it's not always been like that in my experience actually engaging with the community. There are many people that I haven't really wanted to be, shall we say, intimate with, but I have wanted to like play with, have a good time with, have a scene with, is what we normally call it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a sexual thing. There's a lot of catharsis in kink, I found.
Yeah, we can definitely discuss, because I know you, Raven, have complained to me before about how people have this like misconception of kink as entirely about sex or entirely sexual, and that's something that you're committed to like trying to counter a little bit.
Yeah, you hear about that a lot.
yeah, I think that's really important when you're talking about including kink in Pride, because people's argument is we don't want Pride to be sexual. We want Pride to be like an inclusive space for people who are like underage people and people who are asexual. And my response to that is the kink that we want in Pride is not sexual kink. We want the kink that's part of people's identities. And I think people really overlook kink and see it as just an action, like doing kink, rather than being a kinkster or like a person involved in kink. And I think it really is integral to people's identities. It's really part of people's sexualities, which I know you'll touch on more. And it just plays a lot larger of a role in their life than people give it credit for.
Yeah, I know a number of people in the community, the kink community specifically, who are actually ace or ace adjacent in some capacity. Gray, I don't know too much about it. My roommate could definitely tell you more. But it doesn't have to be sexual. It can just be fun, you know?
Well, that is one of the really kind of mystifying aspects about a lot of this, is that on one hand, we tend to very much just decouple sexuality from anything psychological when it's very much not the case, but also just associate kink with just being overtly sexual rather than psychological, and then LGBTQ as not being about sex, like who you love, that same sort of discourse about why it shouldn't be at Pride. I mean, also the kind of queer movement has fundamentally been about sexual liberation and rights as well. So to kind of use this respectability politics lens to remove that history is also quite problematic in itself as well when you look at the history of, for example, sodomy laws.
Yeah. There's always been a lot of stigma both behind queerness and kink. Never really sat well with me, and I feel like one sort of leads into the other for me, like being queer, being bisexual, and being gender fluid. It didn't make me think that I was kinky, but I did find a lot of overlap, like Raven had said a little bit earlier, with the kink and the queer communities. Like it's always felt like a very open and inviting space, depending on who you talk to.
I think you also can't really have Pride without kink to a certain extent. If you look at kink as a form of a sexual orientation or a sexuality, That's when I really think it comes into pride. So we can look at sexual orientation as attraction based on gender. We can also look at it based on number of partners or based on power dynamics. So that's when sexual configurations theory comes in, which is theorized by Van Anders in 2016. That basically says that we can expand the definition of sexual orientation to include these things. So I could look at polyamory, sexuality, as well as BDSM as part of sexual orientation. And that's when I think it comes into pride and comes into part of the queer community.
Now, I haven't had a whole lot of basis in that sort of thought. Do you mind explaining a little bit more to me about, like, I've never really thought of, like, polyamory as being, like, a queer thing or, like, a sexuality.
Yeah, not everyone does. This theory goes in to say that attraction isn't just based on gender. It can be based on more than that. So if attraction is based on more than that, they can be part of sexual orientation, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, because, like, if you're attracted to somebody, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're attracted to, like, only men or only women, because there's so many different genders and everything is such a spectrum. I don't even know if it's right to call it a spectrum, but I found myself attracted to a lot of people that I wouldn't think of as conventionally male or female, you know?
Yeah. No, exactly. So if we can, if it's expanded on gender, it can also be expanded on other variables as well, such as, you know, number of partners or power dynamics.
Power dynamics are fun.
Power dynamics are fun. Yeah.
I mean, I can just ask you to elaborate on your thoughts there.
That's a good segue.
Yeah, do you have any questions about kink from a layperson's perspective that you might want answered, or anything that has always interested you, but I mean, you've been afraid to ask? Maybe there's some stigma behind something? I'm an open book. I like teaching people. I like engaging with people who are interested, you know?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like, well, okay, you know how it's very difficult to tell how much you know about a subject in comparison to the average person?
Yeah.
That's me right now. I'm like, I don't know. I guess
You probably know more than the average person.
we'll see, but I don't know.
Okay.
I could ask one. I guess in the conversation about kink not always being sexual, like that comes up a lot when we're talking about kink on the podcast, and I've always like kind of been curious, like what a non-sexual scene would then look like, because I'm also still like working through the whole like, oh, kink is not always sexual. Like that was something that was kink in general, and then also kink not being sexual was something that was introduced to me not too long ago. So I'm curious. I'm very curious about that one.
Yeah. With your two's permission, I'd like to maybe discuss a scene that we had previously. If you want to give it a pass, I'm totally okay with that. I can always, you know, delve into another experience that I had, but
That's fine.
so it was a couple of months ago. I'm not sure exactly when, but I had actually had a scene with Raven and Jules at one point, and I'm very attracted to both of them. They're both really cute, but they had their own relationship, and I don't want to like necessarily insert myself into it, but we all had a really good time during a scene. Now, Raven is a more domineering personality. You might find by her dress, the way she's dressed now. I myself lean more towards being a submissive, and I also mentioned that I'm a bit of a masochist. So being on the other end of a flogger or a paddle or something like that it's a lot of fun, and it serves as a sort of catharsis or release, not in a sexual sense, but in like a letting go, you know? Allowing somebody else to maybe think for you or do something for you, or make you feel things that you wouldn't normally be able to. Hold on, I had some notes over here that I want to sort of pour through.
While you're pulling those up, I think the way I often explain it to people is like, can a massage be sexual?
Yes.
Can it not be sexual?
Mm.
I think it's really similar in that, like, it certainly can have sexual elements to it, but it doesn't necessarily have to in order for it to be that cathartic release that Flick was talking about.
Okay, I'm gonna give a lot shorter answer. Hitting people just hitting people, just sticking needles in people. I'm trying to think what else. Tying people up. Tying people up and hanging them from the ceiling and
Yes,
hitting
a
them
lot
like a
of people.
pinata. Electro, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Electrocuting people
It's fun.
consensually and safely with the right tools. Having just a general power dynamic is part of kink, where people have like stuff they have to do and there's rewards and punishments, and you're just like controlling some aspect of their life, but not a sexual aspect.
I really like getting my hair pulled. That's
So, in addition to the things that were mentioned about power dynamics and self-exploration,
There's a
some
lot.
people just enjoy also the sensory aspects of a lot of this also, whether it's impact play or some other kind of, tickling some people are very into, things like this. Just depends. You're dealing with different kinds of sensory experiences. But really, for a lot of people, it comes down to headspace and trying to accomplish what is regarded as being a certain kind of flow in a scene where essentially you can kind of completely like let go of yourself to a certain extent and fully immerse yourself in the experience is really what a lot of people are going for.
Yeah.
So, a way to
Absolutely.
kind of break out of your everyday self and the rules and constraints to the point where you almost want to forget that there is an outside world
Definitely.
outside of that moment and that experience.
It's like you're really taken away into this different world. Like you can do anything in this sort of space in well, it's like either dom space or subspace for a lot of people. When you're in subspace, it's like you want to do everything you can to please your person, whether it's like so I'm having trouble verbalizing this, right?
I think. Oh, sorry. Go for it.
So, okay, everyone listening, please. I mean, you can laugh at me, that's fine. But this actually was very effective as a class purpose for talking about things like, for example, people who do the adult babies kind of age play scenes, where I asked the students, so think of the theme park that is close by that starts with the letter D. Please don't sue me, company. But basically, we went through exactly how this theme park structures the architecture, the experience, the interactions with everybody in ways that fully immerses you in the experience. So you basically get to kind of like live in this joyous, wondrous, happy place for a while, right? That's outside of your everyday self in every way. How do you get the people visiting to forget what's outside of those walls? And kind of immerse them in that. So they were like, okay, well, there's no buildings visible from inside the park, that everyone is they have a certain word for the people who work there, but you get the idea. The costumes, the elaborations, the way that they talk, that they set the whole thing up to really fully kind of get people involved in this experience. And it's very similar to the way that a scene works, but that's also a good example to kind of get people to think about how these things are structured, what it's doing for the person, and also to like make it less scary or intimidating for individuals who are interested in it. So that was a fun kind of analogy we had a good time running with for a while.
Yeah, I like that. A lot of it is immersion. Like when you go into the dungeon, there's a lot of people who are dressed up in particular costumes and things like that, who are really trying to like set a feeling or a scene. It's like a fantasy too.
So I don't mean to totally disagree here, but I do disagree to an extent. I think that's very true for play, and it is true for scenes. But I think when it comes to lifestyle, it's very different. When I talked about it being part of a sexual orientation, it's very much an integral part to like my identity.
Okay.
I identify as lesbian and non-binary, but also as a sub. So I think it can be true. There's this fantasy element. There's this taking away from your outside life, but it also is part of my life. It just I coexist with it, sort of.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
So, and you don't have to answer this. So that's more kind of like a 24/7 individual, right? Where there isn't this compartmentalization where it's really part of your everyday self and identity too. So there's different ways that people kind of identify with these groups and how it influences their life.
And it's so dependent on the individual person.
Yes, absolutely, right? And, there's all sorts of other things that you can look into, like, total power exchange, different ways that people kind of incorporate these different elements into their everyday relationships and all facets.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about it in terms of lifestyle. I hadn't actually interacted with kink in that capacity. It's always interested me, though. does life look any different when you learn that you wanted to be a sub, like, as part of your normal everyday life?
I don't know if life really changed, because I think that's to an extent how I've always felt. I think I knew I was kinky from a very young age. I didn't have words for it yet until I was much older, and I didn't start engaging with it until I was 18, nor should you for people listening. But I think because it's always been such part of my identity that nothing really changed other than my structure of relationships. So relationships in high school look differently than they do now, I think, because of that dynamic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I can draw a lot of parallels between that and like learning that I was gender fluid. That's something that I came into only within the last like 5-7 years, and like it's always informed like who I was since a child, but I never really had words to describe it or a feeling to place to it until I like actually learned that being gender fluid was a thing. Like being feminine or masculine in any presentation that I have. I like to wear a lot of dresses and skirts and pretty things. I hadn't really thought about it until much later in my life, and it sounds like that's a kind of a similar experience.
Yeah, I think I knew from young age. I just didn't have the wording for it, so I don't think I necessarily didn't know it existed. I just didn't know that there was kink and was BDSM. I knew I wanted to be like tied up. I knew I wanted all these different things. Like I knew that was just part of me. Like I think it was like the sensory aspect you were talking about earlier. Like I was sensory seeking like compression in some way, or sensory seeking whatever it may be. So I think that started at a very young age, and then as I got older and learned about things, and I hate 50 Shades of Grey, I hate it, but it did teach me the language that existed.
You know, and that's valid. That's an important part of your journey, and you know, that's where a lot of people end up getting the introduction from this generation.
It's not my favorite introduction.
Yeah, it's not, but there's very little points of
healthier
reference.
Yeah, I think there are much healthier ways to get into kink, but if you got turned on by 50 Shades of Grey, then by all means, welcome to the community.
I mean, my generation got into it by things like Pinky and the Brain and Ren and Stimpy and Rocky and Bullwinkle. Yeah, they like tied the people up on the railroad tracks, and they're like, "Oh, okay. I'm into this. What's going on here?"
Do you know the scene
in
Aladdin where Jasmine's like all red, and like, that was the scene for me.
Okay.
I was like, oh,
I was also very like shocked again at a specific scene by the same company where somebody finally grows legs and they're wiggling their toes. How many people who are into feet were like really inspired by that scene watching that? So, you know, all sorts of icons. But a lot of this goes back to kind of childhood play things too, just like a lot of our identity and sexuality. You know, there's that long-standing kind of inside joke that the people who enjoyed getting buried in the sand as a kid are the ones who end up like heavy into like bondage later on in their life also, right?
Do you know those jungle gym equipment that look like spider webs?
Yes.
I used to be like, oh my god, I'm stuck in this spider web.
Oh no, I did that too.
Yeah, fun times.
I definitely came into it later in life. I mean, now that you were saying this is the first time I realized like maybe there was a sign or two when I was little, but I definitely had no realization of it until my first relationship, where I got tied up on a first date. But no, now that I'm thinking about it, there was a time when I was like 5 where this kid did something that I didn't like and that I just viewed as bad, and I just locked him in a classroom and left him there, and I don't know, I enjoyed that.
Based.
That's stupid.
Yeah, I do remember just locking a kid in the classroom. I don't remember what else. I was a little bit, I don't know, was I bossy? Maybe a little bit.
I'd argue that you are now.
I am now.
And that's a lot of fun though.
I don't think I necessarily was, but I definitely liked to dictate what people did. I didn't always like voice it, but I always had the thought of like I liked being in control of other people's actions in specific circumstances, but I definitely didn't have like that realization before the age of like 18.
Yeah, for me, it was William Turner getting tied up in Pirates of the Caribbean by the pirates.
That's a good one.
Yeah, that did it for me.
Pirates.
I didn't realize until years later that was my bi-awakening.
That's a good one.
I mean, it does sound to me like you're talking about, like, being this way sort of since you were a child. Like, I do wonder how much of a component is, like, just sort of innate, and how much is, like, determined, almost? I don't know how to say this without like sounding like a terrible person now.
No, I get what you're getting at. I think that's when I was talking about it as a sexual orientation. It's similar. So, like for me, it is Nate, and for some people, it's not. There can be kinky, fun, sexy playtime folks, something in between, and then there's people who use it as part of their identity. So there's, I think it's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's also dependent also on your actual kind of vibe with whoever it is you're around too. So much of it comes down to that too.
Absolutely, yeah. We all kind of mask a little bit depending on the people that we're with. Our personalities meld and change, some more than others, depending on the company that we keep. And that can really inform your decisions and the way that you react to the world. I think that what you were looking for was maybe nature versus nurture. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, but when I say it like that, it makes it sound like I think that everyone who's into kink had like a horrible mother or something.
Yeah, we're not going to pathologize kink, and I
Yeah.
don't think that's what you're trying to do.
I
Yeah.
really don't like when people do pathologize kink. I don't think it necessarily comes from a trauma space. Now, a lot of people use kink to heal from trauma and to sort of, what's the word?
Shadow
Reclaim.
work.
Yeah,
Shadow work.
Shadow work works. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard that term. Can you
Yeah.
explain it to the
Well,
class?
I've never used the term shadow work. That I can't speak to.
Do you want your
But-
definitions pulled up?
I don't think I had that on the list of definitions.
Oh, no, you just have other stuff.
I have all the fun kink things on there.
Mm-hmm.
Did you speak to that?
Sure. I mean, this can manifest in certain ways, whether it comes down to maybe your interactions with people or things that you're attracted to, or even the pornography that people watch, where in some way they're trying to, in a way, gain some sort of catharsis or release or power kind of sense back from something that traumatized them in the past. So kind of doing things almost like in an exposure therapy, that same kind of idea where it becomes less threatening and eventually you work through it and gain a different understanding of a situation and it's less scary for you in a way. But that also can sometimes trigger people and lead to even more shame. For example, if you're watching something that you were previously traumatized by, why am I, into this? And recognizing that this is a consensual version of something that happened to you, right? So kind of reframing it psychologically for yourself.
Consent is always going to be key to kink. Don't let anybody ever tell you anything different. Consent is always going to be key to kink.
Risk-aware consensual kink.
Yeah, you said it was RAC earlier, right?
RAC,
Yes.
yes. RAC stands for risk-aware, essentially.
Risk-
Consensual kink.
And I also
Essential.
believe that all scenes should have 2 safe words and an extended color system, which I use in all scenes, and people have never heard of my extended color system. So there's red, yellow, green. Red is a hard stop. Yellow is pause and let's discuss. Green is keep going. Yeah, blue. Blue is harder, more. Yeah.
I like
And then, wait, what's purple?
I don't use purple.
This
I
doesn't
don't
sound
know
like a
purple
very
is.
useful system if you don't remember what
I've never heard of purple.
There's
Well,
one
but
more
I do use
color
blue.
that I've used with other people.
I don't know purple. I do use blue.
Yeah,
the
and then
stoplight system is wonderful, though, at the very least. And I do like
Yes.
blue. Blue is a great addition.
blue is a good addition. And then you also should have 2 safe words: a verbal safe word and a non-verbal. Yeah, double martial arts double tap. Or
Mhm,
sometimes people hold things and drop them.
Yeah, because sometimes you got a ball gag and you can't verbalize what you want to say. Or, I've dealt in scenes where people go nonverbal. I've gone nonverbal in a scene. And it's good to always be able to communicate that. Communication is also very important.
Yeah, subs that don't communicate are my worst nightmare because I can't. I'm not good at intuiting like what they're thinking or what they
Intuiting.
want. I don't know.
Are you intuiting right now?
No, I'm on a podcast right now. I can do exactly one of those things at a time. That's a word. Is it not?
Intuit is a
Yeah,
word.
I mean,
Intuitive.
you
Oh,
can
yeah.
also do different kinds of check-ins in terms of kind of getting an idea where someone's pulse or temperature or
Yeah.
breathing rate is at. So there's other kinds of means to doing check-ins also.
Mhm.
But it's important that you maintain that system throughout and have that communication system ready to go. And then also set up things like aftercare.
Mhm.
Yes.
Aftercare,
Aftercare is-
and that's one of the best things about the kink community. Okay, so I knew this was going to go great to begin with, but I also set up a thing where I'm like, I'm going to have a communication about this with my 81-year-old father beforehand of I'm going on this podcast at UCLA. We're going to talk about these things. And it was so interesting to me because I was talking to him about RAC. And he was just saying, okay, well, isn't it like less sexy if you talk about things beforehand? I'm like, you have not met kinksters very much,
We
Dad.
love talking
They
about
love
things.
talking about it. And he was just like, that's interesting. And that's the thing too, is that the norms that the hetero kind of, and not vanilla in a derogatory way, but just the mainstream norms are very toxic, and they make these things seem unsexy. Like, why should consent or communication be unsexy or break up some sort of headspace with that? That means it's not a very healthy headspace.
It's so sexy to talk about consent. If you don't talk about consent, then there's...
Well, yeah, but the whole risk awareness thing was interesting too, of like, what are the risks here, right? And so I kind of just said, well, that can go wrong in a lot of ways. For example, with things like breath play or choking. So we talking about choking with my father. Shout out to him. Hi, Dad.
Hey, Dad.
But again, like there are some things where you need to be very aware of what the potential risks are and people's limits. All of these things. There is no way to engage in a lot of activities, even hetero kind of monogamous sex, that don't involve risk. There are risks.
Mm-hmm. Put it this way: have you ever been having bad sex where you think that if I just told this person like what I like, if they just knew what I enjoyed, this would be so much better? Like, no, a little bit to the left, or pull my hair harder, something like that. That's communication. That's all you really need. Talk to your person. Let them know what you like, what you dislike. If you don't want them putting their finger in your mouth, then tell them that. Don't put your finger in my mouth. That's communication.
Or what?
Or bite it. No, I'm kidding.
Well,
Tell them.
so
Talk to them.
Locked
Talk to them.
I like fingers in my mouth, and I
Locked
also
in the
like biting
classroom.
them.
Don't walk people in classrooms, that's rude.
No, it's kind of funny though.
It's sort of funny.
It's really funny because I was like 5. I was like 3 feet tall. I don't know what.
As opposed to now.
Okay,
Just
so
like,
on the next episode, we'll be tracking down this person and seeing how that experience was for them, right?
Are they in the therapy?
Just watch they're like a massive masochist somewhere, right?
Hi, Mark.
That was a formative experience.
Don't name it.
Hi, Mark from kindergarten, who I saw in the pool at summer camp 5 years later and said, hi, I don't really like you.
So this is like communication.
Part of your journey.
Hey,
That's
that's
part of
I'm
your
honesty.
embracing
journey.
you now, and I've also learned not to tell people outright I don't like them.
Part
I
of the
kinda like
journey.
that.
You know, exploring that like rotten inner child stuff, that there's a lot to work with there.
Mhm.
I won't psychoanalyze you today.
Oh, today, thank you. I really appreciate
Oh no, that's your own work right there. Have fun with that.
I really do think that if anybody can take away anything from this podcast, it's like, be clear with your communication, be consistent, and make sure that everything you do is consensual. I think that's a great thing to take away for anybody in any capacity, even if you don't want to engage in BDSM or anything like that. Communication is always going to be important. Talk to your people.
Yeah, y'all have a lot to learn from the kink community about community.
And communicating.
We have a lot to share, you know?
I feel
And
like
we love to.
kinky people just argue better too, because they're just like, I don't know.
You
Anytime
just argue a lot.
I do. Anytime I've gotten into an argument with someone from kink, they're just so much better at laying out their perspective and just being respectful about it, because it forces you to get better at communication. You can say like, oh, I need to communicate better and like go to therapy, but like it's a non-negotiable. It just forces you to learn communication and forces you how to learn to deal with people you don't want to deal with. And I feel like there's a lot of jobs that do that too, but yeah, it's a useful skill.
That people should go to therapy. You should go to therapy.
Yes, you should also go to therapy, but yeah, also.
Yeah.
Is there anyone in the kink world that's not in therapy or
I
hasn't been in therapy?
Cannot tell you. I haven't met more than 3 people who I think haven't been to therapy in the kink community.
In the world? Oh, like in the
No,
kink
in the kink
community.
community. Everybody that I talked to has had a therapist at one point or is currently undergoing therapy.
Yeah,
It's like
I haven't
it's
met
a
any
part of the.
I feel like this might be related to the fact that you've described being neurodivergent and being kinky as having significant overlap.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's true. Maybe.
Maybe it's just because I'm a therapist trainee, but I also think most people should be in therapy, regardless of anything.
Yeah, it's good to know yourself. Like at the very least, if that's what you can take away from therapy is just knowing yourself better, that's a win in my book.
And not being a dick to other people.
Some people you need to be
a
addicted.
dick to other people.
Yeah, but in therapy you learn how to know yourself better and not be a dick to other people.
Mhm.
No. Okay.
Oh,
Cool.
good to know. Good talk.
You're welcome.
I've been a lot clearer with my boundaries ever since going through therapy, and
Which
some people
translates
take that
to
as me being a dick. Like, hey, I don't have the spoons for this right now. I can't support you in this. They might assume that, that's a dick move, but I need to keep my own space as well, That's important too.
You look like you're about to say something.
I mean, that's also very subjective. There's always going to be someone that just thinks that of you no matter what you do, too. And you have to be able to learn to just cope with that also. But yeah, therapy is great. Just make sure that you are finding someone, just like with any other partner, that you are in some way opening yourself up to, in this case, emotionally, that you trust and that is helping you to achieve your best self.
Yeah.
It's hard to find a good therapist also. That's also very... Yes, yes, but just finding somebody that you can actually do real genuine work with and go to those difficult places. Also things like for people who've experienced trauma, things like the DBT or CBT and the other kind of CBT, this one, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay.
There's also
I was going to ask.
I mean, hopefully you have a different kind of therapist for something like that. But then in addition, obviously, like EMDR, a lot of great treatments that are out there that are available for people. But for a lot of people,
I know the
sex
other ones.
is
What's
really
this?
predicated cock and ball torture.
No, EMDR.
Oh, EMDR. Sorry. Now I just...
I also didn't know that one.
That's
So that
what
was
that
helpful
means.
anyway.
So
No, I have
cognitive
both
behavioral
the
therapy, and then I'm like,
CBTs,
I
just
just
not
said
EMDR.
CBT.
Yeah,
so.
we could use a vocabulary list here.
EMDR is eye movement
Yes.
desensitization and reprocessing.
Yeah.
It I won't get into it too much, but it's a way of reprocessing trauma.
Yeah, and some of my friends who are practitioners have had like really interesting conversations about it where the hardest thing to actually heal from using things like EMDR, from what my understanding is actually shame. Because of the way that it's just so layered, right? And things like kink and BDSM can be one way of coping with shame and with trauma, but obviously there are great therapeutic methods that are out there. Mental health super important. Destigmatize, get the help you need. Wishing you all the best with that too.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And if you feel like it's not working with your current therapist, or you feel like you don't trust them as well as you feel like you should, it's not bad to look elsewhere. Like, the way that I've heard therapy described and the way that I've described it to other people is that therapy, finding a good therapist, is a lot like dating. You need to find somebody who you're going to mesh well with, who's going to help you, and who you can trust.
Well, I think it's really important to have like kink aware professionals within our field, or I say are within my field. I don't know. I love my classmates, and there's a lot of folks who aren't as knowledgeable on kink yet, who maybe could be. So I've become known in like my classes as like, oh, that's the person you consult with when you have a kink question. It's like awesome, and now we're all becoming kink aware professionals, and I love it. It makes me so happy.
Yeah, it's a sharing information.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Speaking of the kind of awareness part, one of my kind of favorite things is the way that a lot of people in any marginalized group will end up kind of doing the hiding in plain sight thing, whether it's a collar or a hanky or something, other people in the know. And I've had so many students over the years just be like, Kara, it finally made sense why that one relative showed up to like Hanukkah wearing a collar that year. Like, I get it now. And I'm just like, you're welcome. Send your regards to them for me. Like, just, oh, okay, that's what that means. Yeah, it's its own little kind of code. Look up the hanky code, all that too. Make sure that you are
really
privy on
stuff.
this.
There's no way
Just-
you're getting your leg high enough.
I was not a dancer on this one. Okay.
I was saying that, also at some point having a podcast follow-up about more specific aspects of kink or the leather community in particular, or just BDSM. So much to work with. The leather history is something that everyone should get down with. And I love that the LGBT community is really starting to include K more. And that's something that's super important. Look up what just happened with the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, for example. Shout out to them. The queer community really came out for them when they were being disinvited from an LA Dodgers event for the queer celebrations. And it was nice to see that show of support because of that exclusion and continuing marginalization happening. So they're a great organization. Definitely recommend looking up the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. Have fun with that.
Yeah, I got that written down. I'll check that out later.
They're basically like these drag leather nuns that you see out, but they have historically been at the forefront of particularly not only queer activism but fundraising. So I mean they've done a tremendous amount of work for the community with very little recognition historically. So it's nice that, and again, being marginalized because you're not mainstream kind of respectability politics kind of queer, right? So everyone was like, don't invite them. They're Satanists, right? And that's kind of like the main thing of just they're the bad kind of queers, which, you know, it was nice to see people standing up for them. So they've done a lot of wonderful stuff.
Absolutely. So where do we go from here? Does anybody have any further questions or?
I don't know. Hand me the cane and let's kick off the BDSM segment.
Oh, show and tell.
I feel like a lot of this seems very stressful, but it might just not be for me, you know?
Stressful? Like,
Yeah.
like hearing
Sounds
about
like
it or
might
doing
not be
it?
then.
Oh, no, doing it seems very
Oh.
stressful.
All right, so to
Oh,
kick
yeah.
off our BDSM segment, we have some things that you hit people with. So, do you want to explain what BDSM stands for? And
All
Oh, me?
6 things
Yes,
that stands
I don't
for.
remember. I only remember 4 of them,
Yes.
so it's
Yeah.
your turn.
Bondage and discipline, dominance and submission, sadism and masochism.
Yes. So most people think of it as just hitting people, which is also hitting people.
I feel like-
But
Just to clarify, it is also
It
I'm
is
really
also-
worried you're gonna poke Jules in the eye by accident.
good. But no, it's hitting people. It's also just general dominant and submissive power dynamics, and it's what a lot of people automatically jump to when they think of kink. So yeah, I don't know if you guys wanted to talk about your experiences with it.
Well, the first thing
opinions.
that's coming to mind right now is bratting.
Right. So I think we have a
Jules.
perfect segue into that. I think you guys already probably all know a lot about just hitting people and that sort of thing and the relationships between dominants and submissives. So let's segue into bratting.
Yeah.
I'm being
Tell us
stared
about
at.
You're being stared at because you're going to explain it.
Okay.
Putting her on the spot.
Thank you so much. Bratting is playfulness within kink. It can be done on the submission side or the dominant side. But for me, it's just annoying the fuck out of Raven. And I think that's really entertaining. It's the... What?
I'd like to
I
clarify.
like it.
I'd like to clarify that it's
Like,
not
yeah,
always playful.
yeah.
Sometimes it's kind of violent.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no one's consented to that, so I
Right,
won't do that.
but
I do remember chasing people around a room and falling all over the furniture, yelling and screaming and writing terrible things on the walls.
And
Right.
writing on the wall.
What?
Yeah.
It's a
and we were in a
whiteboard.
classroom segment, and there was a whiteboard.
Ah,
so
back to
not.
classroom.
So like normal writing on the walls.
Yeah.
Normal writing.
There was a
walls.
dunce cap involved at one point.
There
I
was
think?
a dunce cap.
I don't
Oh,
remember this at all.
You don't remember the dunce cap?
You don't remember the dunce cap?
You
Okay.
don't
Integral
remember the
part of
dunce
information.
How dare I? Anywho.
Put that on a t-shirt.
It's that playfulness within kink. It's being able to talk back to your dominant and maybe the not kindest way, but still being able to show them respect within reason.
So
Don't
yeah.
ever look for
So
that one.
Raven, would you like to explain?
Would you like to elaborate?
So I think the point of us talking about this is that it's not as always cut and dry as someone's a dominant and someone's a submissive. Sometimes there's pushback on that. Sometimes people are switches and they switch between being a dominant and a submissive. And sometimes there's just a lot of pushback about those roles, and that's
Everybody's
just part of the
everybody's
community.
dynamic is different. You know?
Everyone's dynamic is different.
The thing that I enjoy most about bratting personally, because I'm somewhat of a brat myself, is the punishments you earn, and that's punishments with an F, because it's a lot of fun.
punishments.
Getting into a little bit of trouble, you know.
I guess we can talk about the whole
Okay.
like control and punishment aspects of things and how that works.
We definitely could if you'd like, but I think we're running out of time.
So I was just looking at
Okay, so
the
far,
flogger,
honestly,
by the way.
we don't
I
have
mean,
time.
I don't
This is
have my
my
glasses
flogger.
on. So
Her name's
just
Lily.
for
Oh,
give them
that's
names,
nice.
I
yeah.
didn't know there was
So
a name.
they don't have to necessarily be big and scary too. For people who might not necessarily be into marks or pain, you can get all sorts of lamb leather with much like kind of longer, thinner straps like this that are more about, again, sensory too. So
So, like,
they're
big
not
fluffy
necessarily scary in that kind of regard that some people might see them as. They can be fun in different kinds of ways, and there's all sorts of different floggers out there that you can go explore and see what kind of experience you want from it, but they're multi-purpose use.
And it doesn't even have to be painful, you know?
Yeah.
Because I heard you mention sensations and things. There's a lot of sensation play in kink where you take like
Banjo picks.
Not the banjo.
That is an actual thing. Someone did hand me banjo picks at the start of a scene once.
Okay.
Before I played banjo.
It could be a soft touch, or it could be a little bit hair pulling. It could be like a pinwheel, or a little bit of electrical stimulation. It could be like a piece of ribbon along the small of your back. You know, it could be all sorts of things. It doesn't necessarily have to be painful. It can be pleasurable, and it can be fun in other ways as well. It doesn't. The takeaway here for BDSM is that it doesn't have to be aggressive. It doesn't have to be scary. It can be whatever you want to make.
It does not always, and people just generally think it always involves some sort of pain or humiliation. That's really not the case at all. There's all sorts of ways that you can incorporate aspects of this into your life that don't involve that. But that sometimes ends up being a barrier for some people trying to get into the community, of thinking that it's just about, this kind of, pain, where it doesn't have to be. That's really not part of it for everybody. Some people are not into that.
And it can also be artistic and beautiful as well. If you look up shibari, for instance, it's just rope, and it's beautiful. There's an entire art form around it, and that's kink as well. Highly recommend looking at a shibari. A lot of people are very much into it, and for good reason. It doesn't have to be it doesn't even have to be a sensual or a sexual thing.
It doesn't
can
have
just
to be restrictive. It doesn't necessarily have to be bondage. Sometimes it's just decorative.
Yeah. I've
Fun.
seen some beautiful full body pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And these chest harnesses and things, and suspension is also really, really cool. That's something I've really been into. Suspension is where you might suspend somebody by a rope. Where, how is the best way to describe it?
You just said
It's like a pinata.
You're just
like the
hanging.
human pinata.
Don't do suspension unless you've been trained by a suspension master.
Yes, definitely. You need to know what you're doing before you do that, because there could be a lot of problems with that.
It's very
Cutting off blood flow, restricting movement. It could very easily damage you if you don't know what you're doing. So definitely know what you're doing first. Well, no.
That's true.
Risk aware.
Risk aware.
Everything
aware.
has a risk. Existing has a risk.
There's so many kinks you can do with a little bit of experience, and suspension is just not one of them. You could just quickly learn a lot of things from people and videos and demos, but that is not suspension.
Rope, very good entry level.
Yeah,
Suspension, definitely not entry level.
Yeah, so in addition to having kind of the 24/7 and the more kind of occasional practitioners in this, they also have distinctions between other things too, like whether something is high or low protocol, in terms of being more kind of improvised and loose with how the structure operates. If you end up in the house of somebody who is a high protocol 24/7, you will very often see Post-its and signs all over the house of what the Dom expects. So that's generally a pretty good indicator of that's the kind of scene that an individual is involved with. But it can get to, like I said, very kind of no distinction between that and your everyday self, depending on who the individual is. Sometimes people start off here and end up here, or vice versa, but just have fun with it. Get weird.
Yeah,
Find yourself.
Definitely get weird with it. I'm thinking of some high protocol things here. Some of it is very much Bridgerton. I keep thinking back to the whole era where people had maid servants and stuff, and I'm that's got to be someone's kink in that house,
old
right?
guards.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of actual
the beef eaters.
the nobility and stuff back in the day, where they had
at Buckingham Palace.
20 servants and stuff. That's pretty high protocol. But then on the other side of that, there's also brush your teeth before 9 p.m. See that right there? Get to bed early.
It's 11:45. Yeah.
One thing that has constantly been a thing, it's huge in the kink community, specifically for brats, is drink your fucking water. Drink water.
I've literally never met a hydrated sub. I have yet to find one.
I
We're
like
still
coffee.
That doesn't count.
It's made out of
That
water.
also does not count.
Yeah, you can't see this, but Flick is over here drinking an 8 p.m. Red Bull.
I wanted to be awake for the podcast. I had a long day. Okay?
You'll now be awake for the next 10 hours. So.
A price we have to pay.
And what do you think is the base of that drink? What do you think the first ingredient is? Water.
Is it?
And then
Did
the
you have
next,
to take a
Yeah, no,
physiology class
it's
as a
right here.
psychology
Carbonated
major?
water.
you had to take Psychopharm.
Oh, I did take Psychopharm. Psychopharm was terrible.
Did it,
Besides the point.
did it teach you that caffeine is a diuretic?
Yeah, I learned that one. I've been drinking a lot of tea. Really enjoy tea, and that, that's definitely a diuretic as well.
She's a little so unfortunate.
Hydration shaming now. Come
Hydration
on,
shaming.
What
everybody.
is this?
Banjo shaming, hydration
Banjo
shaming.
No, I will
It was
shame the
banjo
banjo.
shaming.
I'm banjo shaming.
Everyone's shaming the banjo.
JT's
For those who are
banjo
not in the
shaming.
know, we were definitely shaming the banjo before the podcast started.
Shame.
Look, you got a week of banjo. Very graciously.
I did get a week of banjo. Go watch my banjo episode. It's fantastic.
When was that on the podcast? Do we have
Last
an episode
week.
number?
That was
That was
week.
last week. Excellent.
So what is it about the banjo?
Literally nothing except that they didn't want it on the podcast.
So it's a sadistic thing
That's
then,
the
right?
audio's so bad.
It fucks
You,
with the audio.
you like
loud.
it because they hate it.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand now.
I
I,
just
respect.
Lock me in
I
a
get that.
classroom.
I also like the banjo generally as an instrument. I think it's very jaunty.
I like the banjo,
Jaunty.
just not on a
Jaunty.
podcast.
I like the bluegrass vibes. You know, Taylor Swift uses it to play mean, or at least used to use it to play mean.
I'm also
Um,
a Taylor Swift hater.
People think that's a
You're
personality
outing
trait.
yourself here.
Sadism by
Valentine's
banjo.
Sadism by banjo.
Sadism by banjo.
Please
There's
stop.
like, it's gotta be an
Stop.
indie band with that name somewhere.
If
you
I were
know?
to lock
Sure.
someone in a room
I'd
to this
listen to
day,
Sadism
I would
by
play alternate between playing my clarinet and the banjo.
You'd be locked in the room also.
It's like
then,
the worst
surely.
punishment in the world.
Outside the
From
door.
the outside the door.
Is that the worst punishment in the world?
Just like being really loud instruments, and I have
Okay.
sensory issues.
Don't do it.
So is that, to what extent is that being sadistic versus bratty for you?
Ooh.
That's
a
good question.
You're a brat.
I
Is it
don't
both?
consider myself
No,
to
but
be
you
a brat.
like saying don't bring a banjo in, and then immediately jumps through multiple hoops to get a banjo that you don't play. It's bratty. That's bratty.
I did spend a month trying to get a banjo. I was knocking on the sky in the music
God,
department
you're so
store.
dedicated.
And then it ended up being like through a friend of a friend of a friend, I ended up getting a banjo.
Bratty.
But no, I am very sadistic with my general life and my punishments. There is kneeling on Legos.
Yeah,
There's a lot of
that's
tradition.
painful. That's
There's a lot-
fucking painful.
I know people are surprised when I mention that. I'm like, you haven't thought of this before.
No, they haven't, Raven.
Well,
Get innovative with it.
Creative, yeah.
Yeah.
get creative. Don't be afraid to put some Legos in some cold water too. Just saying.
Yeah. You
Would
know what's been
Legos
really
float?
dangerous?
They don't float.
They're made of
We haven't
plastic.
tried it.
If it's
Yeah, they're
2
made of
inches of
plastic.
water, they don't float.
They might float.
Fine, find out.
Someone's in
But-
trouble.
Shut the fuck up.
Anyway, sadism. Does anyone have anything else?
Sorry, I got distracted trying to think about if Legos would float.
I feel
I don't
like
think
they
they
would.
would.
They would?
I feel like
I don't
I feel
think
like
they
they
would.
would. I think
Heavy.
they would. They're plastic.
They're like,
Yeah, but I feel like, but water's not that dense.
I've
well,
wanted to
it's
set
water.
Plastic usually floats in water.
I've wanted metal Legos for a while. So
Great.
I may have to look
I
into
think those would float.
I don't think
You
those
think
Metal
metal
Legos?
Legos would
Yep.
float?
I do.
That's
I don't
not
think metal Legos.
So
You're
metal
also
Legos.
you're contrarian.
okay.
Okay, we are so far off topic.
We are. That's
happens
why
every week.
it does.
I mean, this is about being creative. I think the greatest ever kind of scene that I've witnessed at a leather title holding contest once.
Ooh.
This leather if you have not gone to a leather title holding, oh my gosh, they do the Q&As. They have a scene that they perform with their leather family. They have the little
Aw.
fashion shows.
Oh,
All
yeah,
of
yeah,
this
I've heard
stuff.
about that.
I actually saw a leather family get up and do a whole kink scene in a Build-A-Bear theme. Like
Hello?
oh my goodness, it was remarkable. But it's creative. You're doing something new, stepping outside of the norm in that way too. So
Take me
they had a
stuff
lot
me,
of-
bring me home.
yeah, they had a lot of fun. The Legos, Oof. I mean,
Ugh,
people
I
always say
know.
that. Go step on a Lego.
That's
No,
really
don't kneel
good.
on a
Yeah.
Lego.
Yeah,
Stepping
go.
on
Yeah,
it.
I think
that's
that's
a
where they got the
saying. That is a
idea.
saying. Yeah, go step on a Lego.
Is that where you got the idea? Where did this idea come from?
I just
Well,
personally
Legos are
don't like
painful.
stepping on Legos.
I mean, maybe that's just me and my Rocky and Bullwinkle era kind of like
I
saying,
have
right?
heard
Like I'm a
just-
different era, but yes.
I have heard that, but yeah,
Yeah,
metal
I've,
Legos are legit. I don't know.
I've heard
That's
of
not
kink
too bad.
referred to, like a couple of scenes that I've seen referred to as Looney Tunes sex.
What? I haven't
With
watched
the
that.
slapping, the screaming, the spanking, and the yelling.
Okay, but Bugs Bunny is a legit queer trans icon.
I believe it.
Literally, with the
Oh,
whole
I saw
dressing
this
up to
earlier.
full Elmer, and yeah.
Big fan.
Yeah, a lot of people say that, Bugs Bunny was like their main kind of entryway into a lot of this. So.
That's hilarious. I
Yeah.
adore that. That and Tony the Tiger. Some people are really into Tony the Tiger. You know who you are.
They're
Shout out
great.
Shout out to furries.
Shout out to furries!
Shout out to
No,
furries.
we don't have any furries here. I invited some furries, and they said they don't like talking, so they're not here, but they are here in my heart.
They're a little
Aw.
skittish. Gotta feed them first.
And we are unfortunately running out of time,
No.
so I hope if no one has any last important closing thoughts, then I will just wrap it up.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah?
So, I've been JQ.
I've been Raven.
I'm Jules.
I've been Emma.
Kara over here.
And Flick.
You can follow OutWrite on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the website formerly known as Twitter. You can read our articles at OutWriteNewsmag.org. That's right spelled WRITE. And I think the moral of today's episode, get weird with it.
Oh, it gets so weird with it.